And thank you to this amazing group of co-conveners that will be needed more aggressively as we deal with all these issues. So thank you. Okay, well, I appreciate being able to get the information out to people. It's very important that we try to give you good guidance, try to cover the scenarios that may arise. But what we also decided with the co-conveners is to give you a train the trainer type detailed PowerPoint. So it's about 90 pages long. We're not going to go through every page today. But the goal is you will have this after the program. You can go back and look at it. And sometimes what I have found in helping companies is it's good to have the resource when you need it and take a few minutes when someone's knocking on your door for 10 minutes to go sit and flip through it again and get help and remind yourself what to do. Also, you have a chance to protect your companies by conducting internal I-9 audits, which can give you great protection. And to do that long before the government comes knocking. And that can also prevent further interest by the government when you have your I-9s in order, you know what to say and do, you've prepared ahead of time, and it will help tremendously as we go through this. So there's a lot going on, but as you know, in business, you're always improvising, adapting, and overcoming. We made it through various types of raids in the past. We've made it through COVID. There's many things that you're dealing with. So today we're going to focus a lot on the I-9s. And remember, today we're giving you general information, not about a specific circumstance. But if you want some guidance or we don't cover a particular topic, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A section. And my partner, Heidi Nangilman, will answer those as fast as she can to the program and help in that regard too. But what's going on now? Why are we talking about this? And what's different? So it seems since the late 1990s, and I've dealt with well over 1,000 I-9 audits, it changes depending on the administration. It depends, and it goes up and down, and sometimes they want to do more raids, sometimes they just want to do paper I-9 audits, sometimes they have different focus. And then sometimes, and that's on the federal level. And honestly, let's remember, the only one that can look and see I-9s are the federal ICE program. They're not allowed to be shared with other companies who might hire you and say, I want to see your I-9s. We're not allowed to do that. It is owned by the ICE, federal government and ICE. So if you have local law enforcement asking you for I-9s, or if you're a construction company and you're a subcontractor, and the general contractor is saying, to work on my site, I need to see your I-9s, that's not proper. But we have a very nice letter and a way to explain that to them. They don't mean to overstep the law, but a lot of times people just don't know. So the I-9s have to be kept separately, not in a personnel file. They have to be pulled separately in your company files, and they're reserved only for ICE, virtually only ICE. So keep that in mind. So right now, we've seen before a lot of I-9 audits, and that's why we focus on that and give you a lot of tools today to go back and do your own I-9 audit with a lot of information. Workplace raids change up and down. So far, ICE had not conducted large-scale raids of workplace, but as you know, last night and this morning, they did one in a roofing company in another state. So we do know that can happen. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. Like, what are the steps? What's going to possibly happen? How best to deal with it? One of the areas that gives us all great concern is that all the way to date in all of these administrations, we've never had the IRS and ICE do any data sharing agreement. ICE and DOL sometimes did, but never the IRS. That is being discussed right now, which is raising a lot of concerns because to date, many people who may or may not have had status were always told they could file in the IRS system. So what that may mean, if it comes true, is we may get more inquiries to respond to. So just please think about our responding to government investigation memo. So it doesn't really matter who comes knocking on the door to ask you for data. We want to follow the same procedures for everyone. So there's either going to be a request by a government agency, whether it's Department of Labor or ICE or IRS that may ask for information. We want to have a system at your company so you're treating everyone the same. You can't be accused of obstruction of justice. And these are different than if, let's say, the other category is a warrant that might be served, and that's a different item. So we'll talk about that. The other thing we're seeing, and some of you've already heard, is there was a revocation of the temporary protected status. So almost 350,000 lost their TPS protection. Trump instructed that the 2021 temporary protected status for Venezuela be revoked. And there's other TPS protections also subject to being revoked. So some of that has been postponed right now as of March 31st. So this is really timely. So we're trying to stay tuned to that and how it might affect people in your workforces. So please get guidance on that. Don't jump the gun, and we'll be thoughtful on how those are addressed. As there is a lot of legal challenges happening right now. I know Monica Villalobos is handling and being present for one right now. So everyone is staying up to speed on these, which can impact your options and your actions. So just stay close with all of your associations like this. That's why you have an Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, is to keep you up to speed with all of its partners. There have been more than 500,000 immigrants who entered the U.S. since October 2022. They've had their status on April 24th, April 4th. I think it was April 2nd, revoked or by April, I'm sorry, under April 24th. Yeah, is that it? Yeah, and face deportation. So that termination is being challenged. So again, if you have workers who have status in your workforce, don't jump the gun yet. But let's talk about how to respond to the government agency investigations and identity. We call it SSA mismatch, but really it's just identity theft inquiries. They could be from Social Security, local law enforcement, or any of those things. Again, the goal of the company is to treat everybody the same. So this slide is what I spend a little bit more time on, and I think is one of the most important to understand at your company and to get the best for defense and keep you out of trouble. The goal of our strategies is to keep people off the government radar screen. That is the goal. So the first thing is, you see the triangle in the middle, and it shows the company. And the company is the managers, the company, the people who do the work, who put the documents and paperwork together, who address all the procedures or how to deal with certain inquiries from the government. So you're in the middle of the triangle, and we want to keep the triangle protected. So what does that mean? Well, the first thing when we're dealing with I-9 forms and identity theft complaints and allegations like that is the top of this page where it says avoiding knowingly. We want to avoid being accused as a company of knowingly hiring an individual who may not be authorized to work, or knowingly continue to employ a person who is not authorized to work. So what does that really mean? How does ICE look at that sometimes? Well, the first thing that protects you is to the left of the triangle, where it says a fully complete I-9 form. That protects you so much if you make sure all the boxes are filled out, the signatures are on there, that the person who fills out the I-9 form has touched and felt the real cards being presented. You cannot accept photocopies of a card. It either has to be one document from list A or one document from list B and C. So there's a list that you use, and it's list A, B, or C, but it has to be one document from list A, or a big or, one from B and C. You are prohibited from using a document from list A and a document from list C. That doesn't work. That's against the law. So you have to be careful to do the forms right. And again, we have a lot of tips that'll come up that you can go through later that'll help you do your internal I-9 audit. But that's the first step. We have had people where they have been, or companies that have been audited by ICE, and we go through the process where ICE presents they'll stop by, they present a letter, they say, hey, you need to turn over your I-9s, the original I-9s, within 72 hours. Here's where we want you to send them, or we'll come by and pick them up. We usually do them at our office, by the way. I don't have them come back out there usually, but there are different ways of doing it. But they'll give you that type of notice. And then what happens is they take them away and they go through them all to see that you've filled out, or the employee you've made sure has filled out section 1 correctly. And then you, as the employer, and your representative who actually touched and felt the real card and looked at the photo to make sure the photo matched the person in front of you that you're hiring, or that you did hire, I should say, is signed the section 2 and filled that out completely. And then if they're fully complete, they can't generally charge you with knowingly continuing to employ the individual. So that's why it's so important. We have had people or companies have 92% of its workforce turn out to be undocumented or not authorized to work. And so, yes, it was very hard for that company to go through the process to communicate respectfully, as Lydia said, communicate respectfully as to the separation of those workers unless they were able to provide ICE documentation to work, because there are mistakes made, and that does happen sometimes. But when they went through the process, they had to separate those employees who were on ICE's list, who didn't have status or documents that ICE could accept to be here to work in the country, but they didn't receive one fine or further action from ICE for their own company because they did all the paperwork correctly, and they had fully complete I-9s, and they had made sure prior to ICE knocking on their door that they had taken those steps. So that's really important, and I like to emphasize that that fully complete I-9 form does a great service for your companies, and it's best to audit them now, because errors, simple errors on the I-9 forms can be $2,000 or $3,000 per I-9. They're just strict paperwork violations that can cost you money. So it's very important, and that's why I'll emphasize it 5 times more today, is do an internal I-9 audit. First thing you do is look for your list of all your employees. Then you make sure you have an I-9 for all of them. If you're a company that had people work for you since November of 1986, you are grandfathered for those individuals not to have to do an I-9. But because 1986 is when Ronald Reagan implemented the I-9 program. So that's why people prior to that, there was no I-9 program. And so they are grandfathered in if they worked at your same company. So just keep that in mind as a little advanced tip. But most important, fully complete I-9 form. So what goes with that? So now you've got your people trained, you're doing your I-9s. We have tips on how to update or have to do follow-up I-9 if your I-9 is incomplete or you can't find one. But that's the most important step I can tell you today, because when you have that done, it's very difficult to be targeted for knowingly continue to hire. Everybody can sleep at night knowing you have your I-9s, and things are in order and in compliance with the law as best you can. Now, that also means the right side of the company triangle. People in comments. There could be no discussions about legal status 24 hours a day or 7 days a week. Now, what does that mean? When I bring this up, we want to emphasize to employees and supervisors in particular that you don't second guess or judge people about whether they're authorized to work based on the color of their skin, the language they may speak, their last name, if it sounds Spanish or foreign sounding or something like that. You can't judge people. You can't discriminate against people. And that could be national origin discrimination, race discrimination. You can't do that, ethnicity discrimination. So we have to, as a company, we really are in the middle and have to follow kind of a fine line here. We're not allowed to be overzealous and ask for specific documents or a certain type of documents, or say, hey, are you really legal to work? I can't get in trouble. I need to know. You can't say I'll only hire US citizens. So those discriminate. But it also means we want to have our compliance in the paperwork and the process and the system that the company uses in compliance with the law, but also does not go overboard to discriminate. So that also means as people in comments, I usually view it like when you go through the airport, you're not allowed to talk about bombs, because if you do, even if you joke around, the TSA is going to take you aside, probably in handcuffs, and talk with you. So we try to teach the workforce and the companies the same thing. You can't joke about someone's legal status. We had a foreman at a construction company at one time who made some comment inappropriately and falsely. He had no knowledge of this, but he made it and said, hey, I bet all the W-2s that are issued by the payroll department at the end of the year are just thrown in the trash dumpster, because I'll bet everybody here is undocumented and not able to work in this country. So that got ICE's attention. That ended up in a raid. It was completely false. It was disrespectful to the office team who were doing everything right. And it was not true. And they had I-9s and had done paperwork on every single person. But the superintendent or foreman in the field didn't know that. So we tell them, if you have knowledge that someone's undocumented, and it's specific knowledge, not discriminatory based on just looking at them or hearing them talk and wondering if they're legal to work. If you have specific knowledge because they tell you that an employee is not authorized to work in this country, then you must bring that to human resources. They will investigate it and look into it like any other HR matter and take appropriate action and move forward. So that's how you want to talk about people in comments. There really should be no discussions about legal status. And why is that? Because once you have your system in place at the company and you're following procedures that follow the law, everyone should be presuming at the company that everyone who is onboarded to work, new hired, is legal to work. And we shouldn't go backwards unless they've come and told one of you that, hey, by the way, I'm not authorized to work. Can the company help me? Or how do I deal with it? Or I'm getting afraid and I don't know what to do. Because if they tell you that information, you have to follow up to actually do an investigation from HR and figure out the appropriate action. Now, sometimes people talk, or employees may ask for their family and friends or in their community who are getting scared and say, hey, have you heard anything? Do you know anything what the government might do? Do you know anything about a program? And that is a different question. And there's times companies can say, we don't know anything more either. We can only talk about the people in our workforce who's legal to work and authorized, but we don't have a program, or we don't know, or we can refer them to some of the right organizations that are out there to help them. And there are those organizations and resources which some of the co-conveners can provide. So that's the top of the whole triangle, the right and left, and that's very important. Now, what holds the triangle up? These strategies. The first one is responding to government investigations. So we're going to give you an outline of the memo for that. The second one is, so you want to have a response. How do we deal with it? How's the front receptionist, when someone comes in the front door, what are they supposed to say and do? If ICE comes in, if law enforcement comes in, we're going to give you those words and those summaries. How do you deal with an ICE investigation? Those are sometimes the I-9 audits are the easiest for us to deal with. We don't really have an issue with a straightforward I-9 audit. It's pretty simple. They come in, they drop a form. If they start asking a lot of questions, usually someone will call us. That will stop usually, and they'll just wait for us to give them the information, because I-9 audits are really paperwork audits. You think back in school when your teacher took the homework at night in the old days and circled and marked everything that you did right or wrong. That's exactly what an I-9 audit is. It's going to be prior to the government knocking on your door. Did you have it all corrected, and is it complete? The crisis communication plan is how to deal with it if it affects your company. We did a lot of those back in the day when we did, as Lydia said, the Arpaio raids. So we had to deal with If there's a full-on raid, what do we prepare for? Well, we may have to have a communication to our customers. We may have to figure out our workflow. We have to do a number of things depending on what happens. So there's always a system for that we have, but we don't have a lot of those raids happening, but we do anticipate a lot of I-9 audits, but we don't know what the future holds. So I wanted to cover everything today. How do you respond to requests for personnel documents? Companies generally do not just share their personnel information with people. Whoever comes to the door, we don't know who a bounty hunter is versus law enforcement versus ICE versus Social Security no match. Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of agencies. So generally, there's a process that's in our memo that we're sending, that's next on the PowerPoints, that will tell you how to deal with that and suggest ways of dealing with it. If you have someone on the phone just start giving information to somebody who calls in, that's not the best way to handle this at all. I would suggest not doing that. You want to have a system. There needs to be a request. There needs to be a response. Sometimes we do it, sometimes you do it, but you want to be thoughtful in how you're responding. Even if DES calls you and says, I need to verify if this worker works there and if this social security number is being used. That's what we're talking about. We have a system. It's outlined in the next few PowerPoints on how one way to deal with that. Because how you respond to these inquiries from SSA, Social Security, DES, police, citizens who call in and say, hey, someone at your company is using my child's Social Security information and I can't get food stamps. You need to fix that. We have a script for that and a process for that. So we don't ignore these things as a company. I think my suggestions has always been have a system. We keep it compliant, but not overboard. And that way there's less targeting of you or your team individually. We don't know if SSA no match letters, Social Security no match letters will start back up again. We have not seen them in a while. Mostly the inquiries in the last 2 years that are frequent are from DES, from the State Unemployment Agency, access. People are told they can't get access if they're showing up as working at a company, even though they're not working. Someone's borrowing that Social Security number to work. Occasionally, we will get the police department showing up for identity theft complaints. A lot of what we receive from companies or companies receive is citizens who call in or residents that call in and say someone's using my Social Security number. So that's the most right now. We have not seen the no match letters right now. And we know there's billions of dollars, right, tied up in all the monies that have been paid by those who turn out to be undocumented that work in the system, that all the Social Security money's paid goes to Social Security as unapplied and it's holding up that system because it's multiple millions of billions of dollars. How to respond to customers or third parties. There are ways of doing that. And then on the right side is the new hire packet. What does your new hire packet look like when you're hiring people? It's a really good idea to have a number of items they sign. If it's always good to update employee handbooks and policies, but it's important to have a couple forms I want to highlight to get signed. One is an anti-harassment, anti-discrimination, no retaliation policy. I call it a respect at work policy because we have to balance the laws with anti-discrimination too. A W-9 form is important to have everybody sign their Social Security number on a piece of paper. We're not allowed to ask them for their Social Security card. If they happen to show it as a list B and C document, that's different. But after they show you whatever document they want to show you, for list A or B and C, we're not allowed to ask for different. We're not allowed to ask for extra. That's against the law. Kind of surprises people, but we cannot. So if someone, for example, shows a permanent resident card to qualify for list A, you're not allowed to ask them for a Social Security card and a driver's license. It's against the law. You're not allowed to just say to people, can you just show me your Social Security card and driver's license to fill out the I-9 form? That's against the law. So they get to choose. The key is the employees get to choose what documents they show to complete the I-9. I always like to have a W-9 on backup, signed by all the workers. so that I can use that with the police when they do investigations or DES, because then I don't have to, generally, it doesn't get further into the workforce or the company. If we have a certain letter we send back to these agencies for our companies and attach certain items. So just something to think about there. You may not have used a W-9 in that way. W-9s are generally used for vendors, third parties, independent contractors, but this is for a different purpose that would go in the regular personnel file. W-9 is not an I-9, so keep that in mind. Again, update your employment policies and handbooks. You want to avoid national origin discrimination. Watch your contract provisions right now to protect the companies. So we may go through a cycle of a labor shortage and a transition over the next 2 years pretty actively. So you want to go back and look at your contracts and make sure that you have an immigration compliance provision, a delay provision for things that may cause issues like labor and other transitional issues that shut your job site down or something that affects you. And then always be aware of when you need an attorney-client privilege communication or discussion. It's better to do it early. The way that we have found to make the most difference with government agencies is to be ahead of it, not wait till there's a citation or set of fines. It's at the moment that you get the inquiry is a better way to influence and address it all to help protect the companies. Okay, I spend more time on this page because it's the foundation of all these 90 PowerPoints we're giving you to go through later. And the different pieces of this page are in these PowerPoints. So I'm going to go through some PowerPoints quickly, and I'm going to tell you about some of the PowerPoints that you can refer to yourself to do your own internal I-9 audit. So don't get overwhelmed today with a lot of them, but I want you to have them all so that you don't have to come back and ask, you have it. So first, I do want to spend a little bit of time on how to respond to the government agency visit. So first, you should designate a contact person for all government agency visits or inquiries, whoever that's going to be. And you just want to, and what we usually give out is a memo in English and Spanish that is the responding to government agency visit. You can create your own. You can use some of these ideas to do it. But I even tell the front office person, whoever the first person is, to have the government knock on their door, is don't hide it. It's your memo, with the company. You can get it out and say to the officer or whoever, our company has a procedure. Let me get out my memo if that's okay, and let me follow it because I've just never done this before. It's the first time. You remain calm, professional, and courteous, and don't engage in an adversarial manner. The government officers are permitted in public areas of a business without a warrant. So they can come in the front door and talk to someone, but they will wait generally to talk to whoever your designated person is. That's why you want to know who that is. You do not want to ask the government entity if they have a warrant. If they have one, they'll let you know. If you ask for it and they didn't have one, they'll use that statement as a basis to get one. And it's always generally better, so far, I'll say, to address and work with the government agent without a warrant. Warrants become a very complicated process and cause more complications for your business in a number of ways. So we want to try to avoid a warrant. So what do we say to people? Well, we gave you a script. Look, it's on the bottom of this PowerPoint. And it says, I'm sure, it's on PowerPoint 14. So I want to make sure I get the right PowerPoint numbers. And it says, I'm sure the company will cooperate. However, I am not the person that can give you that information. Please let me get someone to help you. Okay. So I'm sure the company will cooperate. I'm not the person that can give you permission, but let me get someone to help you. So what does that do? It's nice. It's professional. It said the words cooperation. So if they have to go back to a judge to issue a search warrant, they'd be saying, did they tell you they'd cooperate? He has to say yes. And the judge is going to say, well, then why are you not just working with them? It says I can't give permission. So I didn't say no. I said it nicely. Like, I can't consent for you to do a search here or talk to people. I just need to get the right person. So that's why that phrase is important. And you can put it on a little card and have it to remind people. So your heart pounds a mile a minute when you're dealing with something like this. But that's the best thing to have available for any government agency. So then we'll deal with it. Sometimes they come in kind of strong, but that's okay. And some of them will be stronger in their voice or threaten you, or me, a little more bullying. Others will be, okay, who do I need to talk to? But again, if they ask you again and say, what are you trying to hide? What are you trying to do here? I want to talk to someone now. I want to see your personnel files right now. Again, you just state it again, like on the bottom of page 15. Direct the officer to the company's designated contact person or company attorney and allow that government agent to deal with the officer or your designated person to deal with the officer directly. And then politely state again, I'm sure the company will cooperate. However, I'm not the person to provide you that information. Let me get my supervisor or a lawyer who can work with you. So again, you can read it. You don't have to memorize this. You can have it on the drawer. You can have it by your front phone, whatever is convenient. All right. So these are some of the tips for dealing with the most urgent need if someone comes knocking. If they ask again, you just restate it again. I'm sure the company will cooperate. I'm not the person to handle your request. Let me get some information and get the person who should handle this for you. So again, you're staying calm. You have a plan in place ahead of time. You know how to deal with it. It is helpful if you can write down or get a business card or figure out by looking at the insignia on the uniform, who are we dealing with? Is it a sheriff's office, a police office? Is it ICE? Is it Border Patrol? And you may want to establish and call for your local counsel right then to help you with the discussion with the officer right then to kind of keep it calm and cooperative and deal with what needs to be done. Sometimes, and I mentioned on PowerPoint 17, section E, you will have a plainclothes person who will show up and they're not really with any agency, they're fake. They can be bounty hunters, imposters. There's a whole number of reasons. So you want to be careful. You're really dealing with real people that are asking for information. All right. So then what else? Sometimes you have people ask questions. I need to know if someone works here. I need to verify their work shift. Again, we shouldn't be giving out personnel information just randomly like that, right? So the quote again is, I'm not the person to handle your questions and requests for personnel information. Let me get someone who's better able to address your questions and then just get their contact info, their name, their email, and their phone number, and then that can be addressed. If the officer states that they have a subpoena or warrant, ask for a copy, that's allowed, so that you can review it and send it to your company lawyer to review and assist you with that. Where there is a warrant, there's two kinds of items, and one is an administrative subpoena, but one is an actual search warrant. And there's a little bit of difference on how they're handled, but know that that is a different situation, and you want to contact your designated person right away. If ICE shows up to pick up I-9s, they'll serve what's called a notice of inspection. They'll usually drop it at the front door. It is always, it is provided to you at the front, at your office or company. And there'll usually be one or more ICE agents who are always armed. The ICE agents are law enforcement. And they will drop it off, but it's not a criminal review at that point, generally. In most cases, it's just they have an auditor at ICE and they have one or two ICE agents who visit them. They show up and knock at the door. They come in, they hand you the piece of paper that says notice of inspection, and they will ask that you provide the I-9s in 72 hours. So it usually goes pretty smoothly. You don't need to answer a lot of questions at that point. You can get a lawyer on the phone if they start asking you questions. And that's fine to get a lawyer. They know how that goes to be introduced to them. And then they usually leave and you put everything together, which is a lot of work for the next couple days. But that's the process. They will ask you to sign an acknowledgement of the receipt of the notice of inspection. That's fine, but do not waive the 3-day notice to provide I-9s. So do not waive that, but you can assign that you got it. ICE serves it as an administrative subpoena at the same time it serves a notice. That's just normal. That's nothing to fear. It's the normal process. It does not mean that ICE can enter and take documents immediately. So you don't consent to that, and you don't grant permission for that We just follow the normal process for an I-9 audit that's been around forever. It will ask for a variety of documents, but we usually work through that. The most important one they want in 3 days is the I-9 forms. But there are other things they put on the list. If you use E-Verify, they may ask for that. They may ask if you have independent contractors. So there's a whole list. It's dealt with as part of that process. Make sure that as soon as that notice is served, you get help immediately and put your team together, because there is only usually 3 days to pull it all together. So time is valuable then. Item 10, sorry, refrain from voluntarily giving ICE documents or information without consulting and coordinating with your lawyer. Now, what about the arrest of an individual? What if someone comes to your company and is focused on the arrest of an individual? So you do not interfere with the officer, or you can be arrested for obstruction. But the focus will be on that one person and that one warrant that they tell you they have. It could be a marshal that comes in. It could be any number of agencies. So you allow them to communicate and talk to that one employee, but you should also at the same time notify the company's contact person and attorney immediately to help coordinate that effort. And sometimes the officers have been open-minded to move that away from the job site. We don't want to have conflict at the job site. Sometimes they'll ask to stage it at the parking lot. I mean, there's different things sometimes that come up. So it just depends on each situation. We usually don't consent for them to go into other areas of the facility or just talk to anybody, but we do try to cooperate to have them talk with the one individual that the arrest warrant is for. Let's see. And what else do I have on here? Yeah, and we try to keep the work site as calm as possible. We don't want employees running. We don't want it to be told to everybody where there's a big issue. We really want the law enforcement to deal with just the one person who they want to talk to, and that's it. So that's the goal. If they do have a search warrant for documents or things, that's different. It provides the government the right to enter the property and take with them documents or things that are on the list. So again, it'll be a warrant signed by a judge. You want a copy of it, you ask for it. It'll identify the address to be searched. That doesn't mean other addresses unless you consent. So you want to be careful that you don't consent beyond the warrant. So you get a copy of the warrant. You say you can have a minute to read the warrant. They may start doing stuff in the main office. Let them do what they do. Don't obstruct it. Don't obstruct. Don't get in the way. It may specify the time period in which the search must take place. It may have a list of exactly what can be taken and what cannot. So we want to stick with that and don't consent beyond that. And sometimes you can just stand back and say, I just want to take notes if that's okay. I won't be in your way. I need to send this warrant to my lawyer and I'll just take notes, and then take notes of what's being taken or picked up, those kind of things. It's really important for the company's survival that you make sure you think about your IT system and that you have a backup for everything. So if you use the cloud to store your payroll, your data, your whatever information you need to run your business, just in case there is some type of search warrant for some reason that comes in and takes all your computers and your phones. So be thoughtful about those kind of situations. If they were to happen, how would you run your business? It's kind of crisis communication planning. It'd be no different than if there was a fire at your business. Do you have a backup system? Do you have a way to operate remotely? So just add that to the list to be planning and thinking about in case it was needed. We did put in a sample warrant, and this is what a real search warrant looks like signed by the district court, which is not the same as what we're talking about with administrative notices. They're two different things. So administrative notices are like the ICE notice when they drop it off. That's not meaning everything's going to be taken or seized that day or any of that. But a warrant like this is different. And if you see one like this, you make a copy. It's issued by a court. You need to, my suggestion would be you get a lawyer involved right away. And it's a different scenario. And some of these For those who work in the field, for example, what we've been seeing more recently is those who have businesses that do wire transfers or things like that seem to be subject to more of these search warrants right now. So if you have those being offered, be more thoughtful on these plans and some of the procedures. So remember that an administrative subpoena, which is from Department of Homeland Security or a government agency, will have their name at the top, not a court name. So that's why we're providing you examples. So keep in mind, those are two different things. And again, your quote is the same. I'm sure the company will cooperate. I'd like to review this with our legal counsel and have them get back to you. That's for an administrative warrant. If it's a search warrant with a court name across it and you've got all these officers there, don't obstruct the officers that are executing the warrant. Don't argue, don't resist, don't get into a confrontation. Just stand back, ask for a copy, get it to your legal counsel, and then just make a list of notes of what they take. That's always helpful. That's on this list. And they're only to take what's covered by the search warrant. Again, don't fight about it though. If they take more, just put it on your list and people will address it later. And again, I'm going to remind you, don't argue, resist, or get into a confrontation. It's best to just be calm, step back. It's going to be a bad day. I know that, but you don't also want to be arrested. So the other area I want to talk about a minute is responding to requests for employee information. Again, very important. Don't just hand over things from the personnel files. Don't confirm names and social security numbers by phone. So these PowerPoints here direct you to exactly the steps to take and resist pressure even from an agent to give them that information. Just say, we have a system. Let me know what you need. Or to a citizen, a resident saying the same. And we'll get back to you. We will take care of it. If you get letters from Social Security or identity theft letters from any agency, again, HR, the human resources person will be designated to follow up. We have a process for that. And letters that we have like a bunch of different letters that we send out for companies. We try to minimize documents with company employees, managers' names on them. So the goal is to be a buffer and not put the company's names on some of these things that go to the government where it deals with identity theft or discrepancies. The one thing that's important is, as companies, if you can make sure to get this information outlined on PowerPoint 37. So if someone calls and said someone's using their kid's social, get that person's name, get their social security number at issue, whatever's being issued or used allegedly, get their telephone number, their email address or mailing address, because that's really important. And then the words you use is on page 38. I'm sure the company's happy to cooperate. I'm not the person to provide that information. Let me get some info and we will get back to you. And we want to get back to them within the same day or 24 hours. So that's very helpful because they can't probably get some benefit. They can't get their access. They can't get their food stamps. Something's a problem. And, that's where that comes into play. So that's why we do it that way and then follow up. And there's a bunch of different letters that are used. Depends if it's, anyway, I won't get into all that today. And remember to use the Form W-9 as part of the new hire paperwork to verify social security number, but do not ask for social security card unless they show you that as part of their I-9 process. So again, we want to, in summary on this, we presume the company has properly followed the I-9 process when they are showing up at your work site. Workers, we don't want to target anyone with their immigration status, with their national origin status, or any of that. So we want to be very thoughtful. There are a lot of employee resources available. If people in the employee pool are asking information, defer them to those resources. We did add some summary resources in here. We generally do that. We worked with Alessandra. I just saw her the other day, Soler. I had lunch with her 2 days ago. But in the past with Lydia and others and everyone on this call, I'm sure are all part of this united effort, is to provide some information and resources for employees. You have to sort of distinguish yourself as the employer. I'd rather you stick with your line of what you're supposed to do in compliance and then let others teach about what are employee resources for those that are asking for their friends and neighbors. All right, completing and maintaining the Form I-9. I'm not going to go through all this. There's a lot. Again, this started in 1986 when Ronald Reagan had the amnesty program put in place. He also, at the same time, put in the I-9 form. So it's a paperwork issue. The top errors are failure to have one after November 6, 1986. You got to have one. Failure for the employees to complete fully Section 1. They don't have to put in their, by the way, they don't have to put in their email or their phone number. So that's not something they have to do, but everything else has to be filled out within the start of their first day of employment. That's a mistake many people make. So the first day you hire someone, they need to do the I-9 form. Failure to re-verify expired work authorization. That's for temporary visas. So as long as you accept, I'm going to say accept, as long as you complete the I-9 form, and when they show you documents, like what I do, if it was my company, I would have on the front window or where they fill out new hire paperwork, the list A, B, and C document in English and Spanish, because it is available on the Puerto Rico version. So I just put it double-sided and I just laminate or have it on clipboards or put it in the front of your window, because you're not allowed to ask people if they have these documents to complete an I-9 before you hire them. The only time the I-9 comes into play to fill out is after you hire a worker. That's very important distinguishing point, because you can violate the law by saying, hey, show everybody this and ask them if they have the documents, then let's do the hiring paperwork. You actually have to hire them, and then you fill out your I-9. So sometimes it can be helpful to put those posters up in the window, and if you happen to use E-Verify, you can put that up in the window. So then people know when they're applying, and they may self-select not coming, and then you don't have to deal with this part, but it just depends. But if someone comes and fills out the I-9, they have to give you a current unexpired document, one from A or one from B and C, but it can't be expired. So they might show you under list A, a US passport. They can't use passports from other countries, so only a US passport. They might show you a permanent resident card. They might show you a visa. That's a list A document. And then if they show you that, you cannot ask for a B or C document. But if you go over to B and C, they could show you a driver's license and a social security, for example, or a state ID card and a social security. So keep that in mind. And this goes through more details. Like I said, we're not going to go through everything. But I want to hit the top I-9 errors when you're going through your I-9s. It's a good idea to edit them, look at them. These are some of your tips. A lot of times people forget to sign Section 1 or don't date it. That's a violation. These can be 1,000 to 3,000 a piece. So it is important to do this and go get them updated. Insufficient documentation in Section 2. Sometimes our employer company rep forgets to fill everything out. They don't write it in. They forget to put the date of hire. The most simple thing to add, and the company representative misses it all the time, and that's an automatic violation for fines. They forget to sign it. So the person who signs the I-9 form for the company has to be the person that touches and fills the real card. And as long as those appear genuine and reasonable, they just sign it. There's no fear of that. So that's important to do. And the electronic I-9 system, we're having a lot of problems with that. If you're a company and you think, oh, I'm going to use this payroll provider's I-9 system, Heidi and I have a case that's been going on for 2 years where that company, which is a big company, did not have proper audit trails that are compliant, and ICE wants to hold the company responsible, and they don't care that your payroll provider made the mistakes. So be very careful about that as well. So that's just one of those things to, to bring up. Okay, I'm not going to go through all these I-9 documents, but let me tell you what just happened last night. As we finished all the PowerPoints, this morning we woke up to a brand new I-9 form that got issued. And so this brand new I-9 form got released today. So we need you to, and we can give it to Monica and the team to get sent out. And what has changed is the new I-9. It has an addition date of January 20th, 2025. But that only means that from next week forward, you pull that I-9 down and you use the new I-9. You don't redo your past I-9s, okay? So the one that says 8/1/2023 on the bottom left, those are still fine. That was the last version that had just gotten issued. But right now, we just got a brand new one issued this morning. It did also change one of the boxes on it. So the co-conveners can learn about this too. It changed the non-citizen authorized to work that was on the I-9 form in the Biden administration. They changed it back to alien authorized to work. So that's one of the changes we saw this morning. So anyway, that's just an aside, but there's a brand new I-9 form. So this PowerPoint on 46 is now outdated. So please use the new I-9 forms that are available, but don't go back and redo new old forms. If you have someone whose card expires, now when I mentioned you have to have all current documents when you do I-9s, the card that expires is like a visa, not your permanent resident card, not your driver's license, not your US passport. As long as they're current when you accepted them, you don't go back and keep track of that. But you do need to keep a tickler file for visas that expire, things like that. So keep that in mind. And then you would give them notice, like 90-day notice, that you can't let them work one day past the day it expires. And you try to get them to get through the system as fast as they can. Okay. Now, let me tell you I've now covered the whole scheme of things. There's a whole bunch of PowerPoints that I'm not going to go through, but they're all here for you. This is Train the Trainer. You'll go through the sections. You'll go through all this. So from PowerPoints 42 through 67, there are 25 pages to remind you how to do this. Okay? How to do receipts with I-9s, how to have a tickler system. Those are all really important. And then we also put in a section on, general tips. So there's about 11 pages on general tips. So, don't use pencil, use black and blue ink, write your dates out, just some things. If there's a mistake that occurs, complete the new I-9 form. If it's a new hire, do it over. Just throw that one away if it's brand new that day and do a new one. That's just easier than trying to scratch things out or those kind of things. So these are some good tips here that I would suggest you go through in doing your audit. And it'll help you with a lot of details. And one I like to highlight on PowerPoint 72 is don't accept Social Security cards that say valid for work only with DHS authorization or not valid for employment as a List C document. They are important for to go with visas at times. But if someone shows you that, that usually means they have another card like a visa that applies under Section A, and that's the document you need. So just as a reminder on that particular item, don't accept photocopies. The only photocopies you can accept are a birth certificate if it has a raised legend on it, a certified copy. Everything else, it has to be the real documents. And that means that if someone is in the field, like in construction, and they say, hey, I'm touching and holding the driver's license right now, let me read it to you, and calling you in the office to fill it out, that doesn't work. The most important thing about compliance with the law is that the person who signs Section 2 has to touch and feel the real card. So either you have to go out in the field and do it, or you teach that person in the field to complete the I-9. And it means you have to fill out the document title, document number, etc. Okay, the last thing, don't make extraneous notes on the Form I-9. Super important. Don't put post-it note or use post-it notes. Do not write on your I-9s. If you do internal audit and you see problems with it, do not write. Do not write things like audited on, April 3rd, 2025. No notes on the I-9. Don't put the employee ID number on the I-9. The I-9 just stays like it is. There are things you do if you're auditing and find mistakes. We can show you how to do that. Some of this explains that, but don't write on the I-9 like that. On PowerPoint 77, I just wanted to remind you, I-9s you always keep for current employees. You do not necessarily keep, you only keep the former employees for a set number of years. It's very odd, but it's a maximum of 3 years. So in your personnel files, when someone leaves, if you close your personnel file down and you put it in storage and you might keep it for 7 years, that's not true with the I-9. You keep the I-9 separate from the personnel file anyway. and you keep a system that gets rid of them in either 3 years, 2 years, or 1 years after people left you, the longer they worked for you, the shorter you keep it. The shorter time they work for you, the longer you keep it. So for example, if they work for you 3 years or more, you only keep it 1 year and then you shred. If it's after they leave employment. If they worked for you less than a year, you end up keeping it the full 3 years. So anyway, that's the formula just to give you an idea. And then lastly, I know we're running over time. There's always a lot to cover on this. We have a few more things that are in the PowerPoints, which I won't go through by page. We've covered a lot of information today. But just so you know, the ICE regulations regarding electronic I-9 systems, we put in at PowerPoints 80 through 84. So for those who do electronic I-9s, that's an important page to look at. Pages 85 to 93 are just a few quick pages to talk about civil and criminal monetary penalties. I guess I can show you they're there. I'm not going to go through that a lot. As I mentioned, it's a lot of fines and a lot of things. But again, if you do this part right, we have people who don't get any fines, even though it turns out people have, they're undocumented. We have a lot of people who may not have status, even though we have no knowledge of it at companies and we've done our systems. Don't forget the anti-discrimination rules on PowerPoints 94 through 97. Make sure you have a policy that complies. For those of you on E-Verify, I went ahead and put in these PowerPoints 98 through 113. So I like you to go back through and remember the do's and don'ts. So I'm just going to fly through them right now. There's do's and don'ts. They're a different process than the I-9. There are E-Verify audits that are completed that we've handled with the DOJ and with the OIER, the Department of Justice. So they are very particular about do not ask for specific or additional documents. That is a big one, item 11 on PowerPoint 111. That's a big deal, so don't do that. And I put in the chart, PowerPoint 112, and that sometimes helps you to understand how do you do your I-9? And then if you use E-Verify, how does that process work? And are you making sure that if you use E-Verify, you have to actually, if someone comes up as tentative non-confirmation or further action notice required is now the new term, you have to print 2 copies of that document. You have to give one to the employee and you staple or you clip one to the I-9. And then they have a right to challenge. If they don't challenge, there's another document you print that has to be clipped to the I-9. And then that would end the process. But if they challenge it, then there's a referral date that you print off and do it. And then you go through the process on the dashboard. So just remember that. I just wanted to highlight that again. I find this to be helpful for people to look at. And that's it. So Heidi's been answering questions in Q&A and chat. If you guys have any questions, again, we can follow up or stay around, but I want to turn this back over to, I think Beth is going to close it up probably, or Lydia, or either one. But we want to thank you for your commitment to paying attention ahead of time. It's better to be proactive. It's better to plan ahead. And please go do your I-9 audits. That will pay off for you significantly, both protecting your company, the employees, limiting the investigations, and avoiding fines. So hopefully this is helpful. I think you'll find the PowerPoint is a long deck, but it's a good train the trainer deck. So thank you for your attention. Lydia, I'll kick it back over to you.
Thank you so much for providing us this information, and know that this is information only. This is not legal advice for any particular company, but if you would like to have a one-on-one with the attorney Julie Pace, her contact information is on there, and we appreciate her willing to talk with us, to meet with us, and to present a lot of the basic information. Again, this is information. And I know that for those that are interested in the PowerPoint presentation, I think we can have a point of contact through the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, where we will be holding that there. And so for those interested, we'll be able to share it with individuals there. Again, I'd like to also turn it over to Monica and Enrique for some closing thoughts. Go ahead, Enrique.
Yes, so first of all, thank you for all this explanation. As you know, this was recorded, so a lot of you might want to go through this information again. We thank you for being here. Thank you to Julie. Thank you to Monica, Lydia, Monica Villalobos also, and the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce for helping us with the webinar. I know there's going to be a lot of questions and we can follow up. I know there are some already in the Q&A, but I want to thank all of you for being here with us.
Monica.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's a confusing and challenging time, and it's so important that we step up and get ourselves educated, as Enrique said earlier. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for getting the information. We will send the recording out to everyone, and then you can share that as well with your contacts. So you can help share the information so folks can be best prepared. And Julie, thank you so much for an excellent presentation.
All right, and with that, I think we will close and thank you again.